The night was black as pitch when Natasha Thorne threw herself from the train's rattling platform, her body colliding with the hard Arizona earth in a tumble of skirts and terror. The year was 1878, and the Southern Pacific Railroad cut through the desert landscape like a steel serpent. But Natasha had decided that the danger behind her was worse than the darkness ahead. Xavier Kerrigan was checking his horses in the corral behind his small ranch house when he heard the sound, a heavy thump followed by what could only be a human cry of pain. His hand went instinctively to the revolver at his hip as he peered into the darkness toward the railroad tracks that ran about 300 yards from his property. The train's whistle shrieked as it continued westward, unaware or uncaring that it had lost a passenger. He grabbed his lantern from the hook by the barn door and ran toward the sound, his boots pounding against the packed earth. As he drew closer, the lantern light caught movement, someone struggling to rise, and he could make out the unmistakable shape of a woman in a traveling dress, her hair having come loose from its pins. "Madam, are you hurt?" Xavier called out, slowing his approach so as not to startle her. She turned toward him, and even in the dim light he could see the fear in her eyes, wide and dark as a startled deer. "Please," she gasped, trying to stand but failing, her ankle giving way beneath her. "Please, you have to help me. He cannot find me here." Xavier reached her side in 3 long strides, setting the lantern down and offering his arm. "Easy now, let me help you up." "Who's looking for you?" "My husband," she said, and the word came out like poison. "Former husband. The divorce was finalized in Santa Fe 2 weeks ago, but he followed me. He was on that train." Xavier helped her to her feet, feeling her weight sag against him as her injured ankle refused to bear her. Without hesitation, he swept her up into his arms, ignoring her startled gasp. "We need to get you inside and tend to that ankle. Can you walk at all?" "I do not think so," she admitted, her voice tight with pain. "I am sorry to be such trouble. I just had to get away from him. He said he would kill me before he let me go." "You are not trouble," Xavier said firmly, carrying her back toward his ranch house. "You are someone who needs help, and I will not turn you away." As they reached the modest wooden structure that Xavier called home, he kicked the door open and brought her inside, setting her carefully on the worn leather sofa near the fireplace. The interior was simple but clean, the home of a man who lived alone but took pride in his space. A small kitchen occupied one corner, a table with 2 chairs stood near it, and a door led to what she assumed was his bedroom. "Let me see that ankle," Xavier said, kneeling before her and carefully lifting her skirt just enough to examine her boot. Her face flushed at the intimacy of the gesture, but the pain overrode her embarrassment. "I need to remove your boot," he said gently. "This is going to hurt." She nodded, gripping the edge of the sofa, and bit down on her lower lip as he carefully worked the boot off her swelling foot. She could not quite suppress the cry that escaped when the leather finally came free, and tears sprang to her eyes. "I am sorry," Xavier murmured, his rough hand surprisingly gentle as he examined her ankle. "I do not think it is broken, but it is badly sprained. You are not going to be walking on this for a few days at least." "A few days?" Natasha's voice rose in panic. "But I cannot stay here." "He will come looking for me. The train will stop in Old Tucson, and when he discovers I am not on it, he will backtrack. I have put you in danger just by being here." Xavier stood and looked down at her, his jaw set in a way that suggested he was a man who did not back down easily. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the sun-weathered face of someone who spent his days working outdoors. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. "Let him come," Xavier said quietly. "This is my land, and I do not take kindly to men who threaten women. You will stay here until you are healed, and I will deal with anyone who comes looking to cause trouble." "You do not understand," Natasha said, her voice trembling. "Gerald Whitmore is not just any man. He has money, influence, and a temper that has only grown worse since I left him. He nearly killed me in Santa Fe. If a sheriff had not intervened, I would not be here now." Xavier moved to the kitchen area and began pumping water into a basin. "What is your name?" "Natasha Thorne. I took back my maiden name after the divorce." "Miss Thorne, I am Xavier Kerrigan, and I have been ranching this land for 5 years. In that time, I have dealt with cattle rustlers, Apache raiders, claim jumpers, and every variety of desert predator that walks on 2 legs or 4. I am not afraid of your former husband, no matter how much money or influence he thinks he has." He brought the basin over along with some clean cloths and began wrapping her ankle in cool compresses. His movements were confident and practiced, and Natasha found herself studying his face as he worked. There was something solid about him, something dependable. She had learned not to trust men easily after her marriage to Gerald, but this stranger who had come running into the darkness to help her seemed different. "Why did you marry him?" Xavier asked suddenly, then immediately looked apologetic. "Forgive me, that is not my business." "No, it is all right," Natasha said softly. "I was young and foolish. I was 18 and he was handsome and wealthy and said all the right things. My parents had died the year before, and I had no one to advise me. By the time I realized what kind of man he truly was, we had been married for 6 months, and he had shown me his true nature." "How long were you married?" 3 years. 3 years of hell." Her voice hardened. "He controlled everything, my clothes, my friends, where I could go, who I could speak to. And when I displeased him, which was often, he would strike me. The last time he broke 2 of my ribs and gave me a concussion. I knew then that if I did not leave, he would eventually kill me." Xavier's hand stilled on her ankle, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were blazing with a cold fury that should have frightened her but somehow did not. "He will not touch you again. I give you my word on that." "You do not know what you are promising," Natasha whispered. "Gerald does not accept defeat, ever." "Then he is about to learn a hard lesson," Xavier replied, securing the bandage around her ankle. "You need to rest now. You can take my bed and I will sleep out here on the sofa." "I cannot take your bed," Natasha protested. "You have already done so much. You are injured and you need proper rest. I will not hear another word about it." He stood and offered his hand. "Come on, let me help you." She had no choice but to accept his help, leaning heavily on him as he supported her weight and guided her through the door to his bedroom. It was as simple as the rest of the house, with a sturdy wooden bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser with a wash basin, and a window that looked out over the dark desert. Xavier helped her sit on the edge of the bed, then stepped back toward the door. "I will bring you some water and something to eat. You must be hungry after your ordeal." "I am more tired than hungry," Natasha admitted, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The adrenaline that had carried her through jumping from the train was fading, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. "Sleep then," Xavier said gently. "We can worry about food in the morning. If you need anything during the night, just call out. I will hear you." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Natasha removed her traveling jacket and outer skirt, too tired to do more. She crawled under the quilt in her chemise and petticoat, and despite her fears about Gerald finding her, despite the pain in her ankle, she fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted beyond measure. In the main room, Xavier sat by the fireplace, his rifle across his knees, and watched the darkness beyond his windows. He had meant what he said. If Gerald Whitmore came looking for Natasha, he would find more than he bargained for. Xavier had seen enough brutality toward women during his time in the cavalry before he left to start his ranch. He had no tolerance for men who used their strength to harm those weaker than themselves. As the night wore on toward dawn, Xavier found his thoughts returning again and again to the woman sleeping in his bed. There had been something in her eyes, a combination of fear and fierce determination, that had struck him deeply. She had jumped from a moving train into complete darkness rather than stay trapped with a man who meant her harm. That took courage, the kind of courage Xavier respected. He must have dozed off at some point because the next thing he knew, the sun was streaming through his windows, and he could hear movement from his bedroom. He stood quickly, setting his rifle aside, and knocked gently on the door. "Miss Thorne, are you all right?" "Yes," came her voice, though it sounded strained. "I am trying to stand, but my ankle is very swollen this morning. May I come in?" "Yes, please." Xavier opened the door to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, her face pale with pain as she looked down at her ankle, which had indeed swollen to nearly twice its normal size and was turning spectacular shades of purple and blue. "You should stay off that completely today," Xavier said, moving to her side. "Let me help you to the main room, and you can rest on the sofa where you will have more to occupy your attention than these four walls." "You are very kind," Natasha said as he helped her up, supporting her weight again. "I do not know how I can ever repay you for your help." "You do not owe me anything," Xavier replied. "Any decent person would do the same." He helped her back to the sofa and propped her injured foot up on a cushion. "I need to tend to my animals and check my property, but I will not be gone long." "Will you be all right here alone for an hour or so?" "Of course," Natasha said. "I am not so helpless as all that." Xavier showed her where he kept his weapons, including a loaded pistol in the drawer of the side table next to the sofa. "If anyone comes to the door while I am gone, do not answer it, and if they try to come in uninvited, shoot first and ask questions later." "You really think Gerald might find me so quickly?" "I think it is better to be prepared," Xavier said. "I will be back as soon as I can." After he left, Natasha sat in the quiet house and looked around more carefully than she had been able to the night before. Everything spoke of a man who lived a simple but honest life. The furniture was well made but not fancy. Books lined a small shelf near the fireplace, their titles suggesting a man who enjoyed reading history and poetry. A photograph on the mantel showed a young Xavier in a cavalry uniform, standing with a group of other soldiers. She found herself wondering about him, about what had brought him to this isolated ranch in the Arizona Territory, about why a man who seemed so capable and decent was living alone. He wore no wedding ring, but that did not necessarily mean anything. Perhaps he was widowed, or perhaps he had simply never married. The sound of approaching hoofbeats brought her sharply back to the present, and her heart began to race. Xavier had said he would be on foot, tending to animals in his barn and corral. Someone was riding toward the house. Natasha's hand went to the drawer, closing around the pistol Xavier had shown her. She knew how to shoot. Her father had taught her when she was young, before he died. Gerald had forbidden her from touching firearms during their marriage, but the skill had not left her. The hoofbeats stopped outside, and there was a long moment of silence. Then a knock came at the door, firm and authoritative. "Open up. I am looking for a woman who may have left the train last night in this area." It was not Gerald's voice. This man had a deeper tone, rougher around the edges. But that did not mean Gerald had not sent him. Natasha stayed silent, the pistol gripped tightly in both hands. "I know someone is in there," the man called. "I can see smoke from your chimney. I just want to talk." Still, Natasha said nothing. She heard the man move around the porch, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. He was trying to look through the windows. "Listen, lady, if you are in there, you need to know that Gerald Whitmore has offered a $200 reward for information about his wife. Says she is confused, maybe hit her head, and he is worried about her. Now, I do not know the whole story, but $200 is a lot of money, and there are men in Old Tucson who will be looking for you." Natasha felt her blood run cold. $200 was indeed a fortune to most people in this territory. Gerald was using his wealth exactly as she had feared, turning it into a weapon to find her. "If you are the woman he is looking for," the man continued, "you should know he is staying at the Grand Hotel in Old Tucson, and he has hired 4 men to search the area. You would be better off coming with me now, peacefully, before those other men find you." At that moment, Natasha heard Xavier's voice, sharp and commanding. "Step away from my house and explain what you are doing on my property." "This your place?" the stranger asked. "I am looking for a woman who jumped off the train last night. Her husband is worried about her." "Her former husband," Xavier corrected, his voice hard. "The divorce was legal and final. He has no claim on her." "That is not how he tells it," the man said. "He says she is his wife and she is not in her right mind, says she needs medical attention and he wants to take care of her." "He is lying," Xavier said flatly. "And you are trespassing. I suggest you leave now before I help you leave. You hiding her in there, Cowboy, because if you are making a big mistake. Whitmore is a powerful man and he does not forget when someone crosses him." "I am shaking in my boots," Xavier replied with cold sarcasm. "Now get off my land before I lose my patience entirely." There was a tense silence, then the sound of the man mounting his horse. "This is not over, Cowboy. Whitmore will have his wife back one way or another. And you are just a fool who is going to get hurt for trying to protect her. Ride out," Xavier ordered. "And tell Whitmore that if he wants to discuss this, he can come himself instead of sending hired guns." The hoofbeats retreated, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Xavier waited a few more minutes before coming inside, and when he did, his face was grim. "You heard all that?" he asked, seeing Natasha with the pistol still in her hands. "Every word," she confirmed, setting the weapon down with shaking hands. "Xavier, you have to understand, I cannot let you be caught in the middle of this. Gerald has money and he has no conscience. He will not stop until he destroys anyone who stands in his way." "Then he can try," Xavier said, moving to the window to look out across his property. "But I am not some city dweller who wilts at the first sign of trouble. I have faced worse than Gerald Whitmore, and I am still here." "You do not know him," Natasha said desperately. "He will hire more men. He will make your life impossible. He might even go to the law and claim that you kidnapped me or some other lie." Xavier turned from the window and looked at her steadily. "Miss Thorne, Natasha, I want you to listen to me carefully. I am not going to abandon you to that man. I do not care how much money he has or how many men he hires. What he did to you was wrong, and I will not be party to sending you back to someone who will hurt you." "But why?" Natasha asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you risk so much for a stranger?" Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because I have seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing while evil is committed. I served in the cavalry, and I saw things during the war and after that still haunt me. I made a promise to myself that I would never again turn away from someone who needed help, no matter the cost." Natasha felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Xavier replied gently. "Now, let me make us some breakfast and we can figure out our next move." As Xavier worked in the kitchen, frying bacon and eggs and making coffee, Natasha found herself watching him with growing admiration. He moved with easy confidence, a man comfortable in his own skin and his own space. There was no artifice about him, no pretense. He was simply who he was, and there was something deeply attractive about that honesty. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked. "5 years, like I said last night. I saved my pay while I was in the cavalry, and when my enlistment was up, I bought this land and built this house with my own hands." "You never wanted to marry?" Xavier paused in his cooking, a slight smile crossing his face. "I never said that. I would like to marry someday, but ranching out here is hard, lonely work. It would not be fair to ask a woman to share this life unless she truly wanted it. Most women want more than what I can offer." "I think you sell yourself short," Natasha said quietly. "Any woman would be fortunate to have a man like you." Xavier brought over 2 plates of food and set them on the small table, then helped Natasha move from the sofa to one of the chairs so she could eat properly. As they ate, he asked her about her life before Gerald, and she found herself telling him about growing up in St. Louis, about her parents and their dry goods store, about her love of reading and her dream of someday traveling to San Francisco. "Why San Francisco?" Xavier asked with genuine interest. "I have heard it is a beautiful city, full of culture and opportunity, and it is far enough from Santa Fe and from Gerald that I thought I might be able to start over there, build a new life where he could not reach me." "That is where you were heading when you jumped from the train?" "Yes. I had bought a ticket all the way through, but Gerald got on at the last stop before Old Tucson, and I knew that if I stayed on the train, he would corner me. So I waited until we were moving through open country and I jumped." She looked down at her injured ankle. "I did not execute the landing very well, I am afraid. You survived and you got away from him. That is what matters." Xavier stood and began clearing their plates. "I need to ride into Old Tucson today and get some supplies. More than that, I need to let the sheriff know what is happening. If Whitmore is offering rewards and hiring guns, the law needs to be aware of the situation." "The law did not help me in Santa Fe," Natasha said bitterly. "Gerald claimed I was hysterical, that I had fallen down the stairs. The doctor who examined me knew better, but Gerald paid him well to keep quiet. This is not Santa Fe, and Sheriff Tom Beckworth is a good man. He will not take kindly to someone hiring guns to search for a woman against her will, no matter what story Whitmore tells. What if Gerald goes to him first with his lies? Then I will tell the truth, and the sheriff can decide who to believe." Xavier came back to the table and crouched beside her chair so they were at eye level. "Natasha, I know you are frightened, and you have every right to be. But you do not have to face this alone anymore. Let me help you." Looking into his steady gray-blue eyes, Natasha felt something shift inside her. For 3 years, she had been alone in her misery, isolated by Gerald's control and abuse. And before that, after her parents died, she had been alone in her grief, vulnerable to Gerald's predatory charm. But now, this stranger was offering her something she had almost forgotten existed: genuine kindness, given freely with no expectation of anything in return. "All right," she whispered. "But please be careful. Gerald is dangerous." "So am I when I need to be," Xavier replied with a slight smile. "Now I am going to help you back to the sofa, and you are going to rest that ankle while I am gone. I will leave the pistol with you, and I will make sure everything is locked up tight. I should be back before dark." After Xavier left on his horse, riding toward Old Tucson with his rifle in a saddle scabbard and his revolver on his hip, Natasha tried to rest but found it impossible. Her mind kept racing, imagining all the terrible things that could happen. What if Gerald's hired men ambushed Xavier on the road? What if the sheriff did believe Gerald's lies? What if she had brought disaster down on this good man's head, simply by accepting his help. The hours dragged by with agonizing slowness. Natasha tried to distract herself by reading one of Xavier's books, a collection of Walt Whitman's poetry, but she found herself reading the same passages over and over without absorbing the words. The sun crawled across the sky, and still Xavier did not return. It was late afternoon when she heard horses approaching, multiple riders this time. Natasha's heart leaped into her throat and she grabbed the pistol, positioning herself on the sofa so she could see the door. But when the knock came, it was Xavier's voice that called out, "Natasha, it is me. I am not alone, but do not worry. Sheriff Beckworth is with me." She sagged with relief, setting the pistol down before calling back, "Come in." Xavier entered first, followed by a stocky man in his 50s wearing a sheriff's star on his vest. He had a weathered face and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything about Natasha in a single glance, including her swollen ankle and the pistol on the table beside her. "Miss Thorne," the sheriff said, removing his hat respectfully. "I am Sheriff Tom Beckworth. Xavier here has told me quite a story about you and Gerald Whitmore. I would like to hear your side of things if you are willing." "Of course, Sheriff," Natasha replied, though her voice was wary. "But I should tell you from the start that my former husband is very persuasive. He has already hired men to search for me, and I have no doubt he has told them I am the villain in this story." "I have already met Mr. Whitmore," Beckworth said grimly, taking a seat that Xavier offered him. "He came to my office this morning with a story about his poor, confused wife who jumped from a train. He had marriage papers, though I noted they were dated several years back. When I asked about your divorce, he claimed it was invalid, that you had filed in New Mexico under false pretenses." "That is a lie," Natasha said hotly. "The divorce was legal in every way. I have the papers to prove it." "Do you have those papers here?" the sheriff asked. Natasha's face fell. "They were in my traveling bag, which I left on the train when I jumped. Everything I owned was in that bag." "Convenient," Beckworth said, but his tone was not accusatory. "For Whitmore, I mean. Without those papers, it becomes your word against his." "I can write to the judge in Santa Fe who granted the divorce," Natasha said desperately. "Judge Harrison Miller. He will verify everything I am telling you." "That is a good thought, and I will do exactly that," the sheriff replied. "But letters take time, and in the meanwhile, we have a situation here that could turn ugly. Whitmore has hired 4 men, and they are not the savory sort. I have already warned him that I will not tolerate any violence in my town or the surrounding area, but if they find you here on Xavier's property, I cannot guarantee what might happen before I could intervene." "What are you saying?" Xavier asked sharply. "That she should just give herself up to him." "Not at all," Beckworth said firmly. "But I am saying we need to be smart about this. Whitmore has money and lawyers, and he is not afraid to use both. If this turns into a shooting match, even if we are completely in the right, there will be consequences." "Then what do you suggest?" Natasha asked. The sheriff leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "I suggest we turn this around on Whitmore. He is claiming you are his wife, and that you are confused, maybe injured. Well, if you are injured, you need a doctor. I will send Doc Morrison out here tomorrow to examine you and document your injuries, including that sprained ankle. More importantly, I will have him assess your mental state and provide a written statement that you are of sound mind in making your own decisions." "Will Whitmore accept that?" Xavier asked skeptically. "He will not have a choice. Doc Morrison has been practicing medicine in this territory for 20 years, and his word carries weight. If he says Miss Thorne is sound of mind and body, aside from her injuries, and that she is here of her own free will, that will make it much harder for Whitmore to claim otherwise." What about the hired guns? Natasha asked. I have already made it clear to Whitmore that if any of his men so much as set foot on this property without permission, they will be arrested for trespassing. And I will be riding out here regularly to check on things, just to make sure everyone understands that the law is watching. After the sheriff left with promises to return the next day with the doctor, Xavier and Natasha sat in the growing twilight and talked. She told him more about her marriage, about the gradual way Gerald had isolated her from everyone she knew, about how his charm in public masked his cruelty in private. He would never hit me where it would show, she explained, her voice distant. He was always careful about that. Bruises on my ribs, my back, places that could be hidden by clothing, and he was brilliant at making me feel like it was all my fault that I had provoked him somehow. None of it was your fault, Xavier said with quiet intensity. You know that, do you not? My head knows it, Natasha replied. But my heart is still learning to believe it. For so long, I believed his version of events, that I was difficult, hysterical, impossible to please. It was not until he broke my ribs and I saw the look in his eyes, the look that said he wanted to kill me, that I finally understood the truth. He did not love me. He had never loved me. I was just a possession to him, something he owned and could treat however he wanted. Xavier stood abruptly and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. I wish I could make him pay for what he did to you. The best revenge is living well, Natasha said softly. That is what my mother used to say. If I can get away from Gerald, if I can build a new life and find happiness, that will hurt him more than any physical punishment ever could. His ego cannot bear the thought that I might thrive without him. Xavier turned back to her, and in the fading light, his face was shadowed but his eyes were bright. You will thrive, Natasha. I will make sure of it. That night, after Xavier helped her back to his bedroom and she was alone in the darkness, Natasha found herself thinking about him in ways that both excited and frightened her. He was so different from Gerald, so genuinely kind and respectful. But could she trust her own judgment about men? She had been so wrong about Gerald, had missed or ignored all the warning signs in her eagerness to not be alone. How could she be sure she was not making another mistake? But even as she thought it, she knew it was different. Xavier had not tried to charm her or impress her. He had simply helped her because it was the right thing to do, expecting nothing in return. He treated her with respect, asked her permission, gave her choices. These were not the actions of a man like Gerald. The next morning, true to his word, Sheriff Beckworth returned with Doc Morrison, a kindly older gentleman with wire-rimmed spectacles and gentle hands. He examined Natasha's ankle, asked her questions about how she had injured it, and then, more delicately, asked if she had any other injuries, old or recent. The ribs Gerald broke have healed, Natasha told him. That was nearly 4 months ago, and they do not pain me anymore. But there are other scars. May I see? The doctor asked gently. Natasha hesitated, then nodded. With Xavier and the sheriff stepping outside to give her privacy, she removed her blouse and showed the doctor the thin white scars on her back where Gerald had once struck her with his belt. The doctor documented everything carefully, making notes and even creating small sketches to show the location and nature of the old injuries. Miss Thorne, he said when she was dressed again, I want you to know that I have seen many women over the years who have suffered at the hands of violent men. You are very brave to have left, and I will do everything in my power to help you stay free. I will write a very detailed report for the sheriff stating that you are of completely sound mind, that your injuries are consistent with an escape from danger, and that, in my medical opinion, returning you to Gerald Whitmore would pose a serious risk to your health and safety. Thank you, Natasha whispered, tears of gratitude stinging her eyes. After the doctor and sheriff left, Xavier made them lunch, and they ate in companionable silence. Natasha's ankle was already feeling somewhat better, though it was still swollen and painful. She found herself watching Xavier as he moved around his small kitchen, admiring the economical grace of his movements. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured. "Of course. Why did you leave the cavalry? You said you served, but you do not talk about it much." Xavier was quiet for a long moment, and Natasha thought perhaps she had overstepped. But then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. "I joined up when I was 18, right at the tail end of the Civil War. I thought I was going to be a hero, going to make a difference. Instead, I found myself sent west to fight in the Indian Wars, and I saw things that changed me. I saw good people, both white and Indian, killed for no good reason. I saw land stolen, treaties broken, promises turned to lies. And I saw men I respected commit acts of cruelty that haunt me still." He paused, looking out the window at the desert landscape he now called home. "There was an incident during my last year of service. We were ordered to raid a Chiricahua Apache camp. We were told it was a war party, that they had been raiding settlements. But when we got there, it was mostly women, children, and old people. The warriors were away hunting. Our commanding officer ordered us to attack anyway." "What did you do?" Natasha asked softly. "I refused. So did a few other men. We were placed under arrest, threatened with court-martial for disobeying orders. But then word of what really happened got out, and there was an investigation. The officer was quietly transferred, the charges against us were dropped, and we were all encouraged to accept honorable discharges and go our separate ways. So I did. I took my discharge, took my savings, and came here. Do you ever regret it? Not for a moment. I only regret that I did not leave sooner, before I saw so much ugliness." He turned back to face her. "That is why I cannot stand by and watch you be hurt, Natasha. I have had enough of standing by and doing nothing." Natasha felt her heart swell with emotion. "You are a good man, Xavier Kerrigan. Better than you know." Over the following days, a routine developed. Xavier would tend to his ranch work during the day while Natasha rested her ankle and helped with small tasks she could do sitting down, like mending his shirts and organizing his small pantry. In the evenings, they would eat together and talk, long conversations that ranged from books to politics to their dreams for the future. Natasha learned that Xavier wanted to expand his ranch eventually, buy more land, and raise horses in addition to his small herd of cattle. He loved the freedom of working for himself, answering to no one but his own conscience. Xavier learned that Natasha had always wanted to open a bookshop, a dream she had shelved when she married Gerald. She loved reading and had a knack for matching books to readers, for knowing what story someone needed to hear. "You could still do that," Xavier suggested one evening as they sat on his front porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. "Open a bookshop, I mean. Old Tucson could use one." "It takes money to start a business," Natasha replied. "Money I do not have. I left Gerald with only what I could carry, and I lost even that when I jumped from the train. You could save up. Find work in town, maybe at the general store or the hotel, and save your wages." "Perhaps," Natasha said, though she did not sound convinced, "if I can stay free of Gerald long enough to build any kind of life." As if summoned by the mention of his name, trouble came 2 days later. Xavier was working in his corral when 3 riders approached, not bothering to slow as they entered his property. He recognized one of them as the man who had come before, the one he had run off. "Afternoon, Cowboy," the man called out, his hand resting conspicuously on his holstered gun. "We are here on behalf of Mr. Whitmore. He wants his wife back, and he is willing to pay you $500 to hand her over, no questions asked. Xavier set down the bridle he had been mending and faced the three men squarely. She is not his wife. They are divorced. And she is not for sale at any price. That is not what we heard, another of the men said, leering. We heard she is holed up in your house playing house with you. That is not very ladylike behavior now, is it? Watch your mouth, Xavier said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. You are on my property and I am ordering you to leave. Now. Or what? The first man challenged. You against three of us. Those are not good odds, Cowboy. I do not need good odds, Xavier replied calmly. I just need to be right, and I am. You are trespassing and the sheriff knows you are here. If anything happens to me, you will all hang. At that moment, Natasha appeared in the doorway of the house and Xavier cursed under his breath. He had told her to stay inside, but of course she could hear what was happening. There she is. One of the men exclaimed. Come on, sweetheart, your husband is waiting for you back in town. He misses you something fierce. Gerald is not my husband and I will never go back to him, Natasha called out, her voice shaking slightly but determined. You men are wasting your time. $500 is not a waste of time, lady, the leader said. And Whitmore said he would pay whether we bring you back conscious or not. So you can come easy or you can come hard, but you are coming. The men began to dismount, and Xavier's hand dropped to his revolver. I warned you, he said quietly. This is your last chance to ride away. 3 against 1, the leader repeated, drawing his own gun. You are not that fast, Cowboy, but Xavier was that fast. His draw was smooth as silk, practiced from his cavalry days, and his first shot took the leader in the shoulder, spinning him around. His second shot went into the dirt at the feet of the second man's horse, spooking it and nearly throwing its rider. The third man froze, his gun half drawn as Xavier's revolver swung to point directly at his chest. Drop it, Xavier ordered. The gun fell to the ground with a thud. Now get your friend back on his horse and ride out of here. And tell Whitmore that the next time he sends someone after Natasha, I will not aim for the shoulder. The wounded man was cursing and bleeding but managed to mount his horse with his companion's help. As they rode away, the leader shouted back, Whitmore will kill you for this. You have made a powerful enemy. Get in line, Xavier muttered, holstering his revolver. He turned to find Natasha standing right behind him, her face pale. You could have been killed, she whispered. But I was not, Xavier replied, reaching out to steady her as she swayed slightly. Come on, let us get you back inside. Your ankle cannot be happy with you standing on it. But Natasha did not move. Instead, she looked up at him with eyes full of emotion. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking your life for me? Xavier looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I think you know why, he said softly. Before she could respond, the sound of more hoofbeats made them both tense. But this time it was Sheriff Beckworth, riding hard, his face grim. I met Whitmore's men on the road, he said as he dismounted. One of them is bleeding and saying you shot him without provocation. He drew on me first, Xavier replied calmly. There are 3 witnesses, me, Natasha, and his own friends. They came here to take her by force, and I defended my property and her safety. The sheriff looked at Natasha, who nodded in confirmation. It is true, Sheriff. They said Gerald would pay whether they brought me back conscious or not. It was a clear threat. Beckworth sighed heavily. This is getting out of hand. Whitmore is not going to stop, and eventually someone is going to die. I have half a mind to arrest him for conspiracy, but he is too smart. He is careful to keep his own hands clean while his hired guns do the dirty work. Then what do we do? Natasha asked desperately. I cannot let Xavier keep fighting my battles for me. It is not fair to him. You are not making me do anything, Xavier interjected. I am choosing to stand with you." The sheriff looked between them, and a slight smile crossed his weathered face. "You two have gotten close over these past few days, have you not?" Xavier and Natasha exchanged glances, and both of them looked away, slightly embarrassed. "I thought so," Beckworth continued. "That actually might be the solution to this whole mess." "What do you mean?" Xavier asked warily. "If you two were married, Whitmore would have no legal claim whatsoever. The divorce freed her from him, and a new marriage would make it crystal clear that she is not returning to him under any circumstances." "That is ridiculous," Natasha said immediately. "We have only known each other for a week. You cannot build a marriage on such a short acquaintance." "People have married on shorter acquaintances out here," the sheriff replied pragmatically. "And it is not as if you would be marrying a stranger. You have been living under the same roof, getting to know each other. From where I stand, it looks like you get along well enough." "It is not about getting along," Natasha protested. "Marriage is supposed to be about love, about commitment. Xavier should not have to tie himself to me just to protect me from Gerald." "What if it was not just to protect you?" Xavier asked quietly. Natasha turned to look at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "What?" Xavier took her hands in his, holding them gently. "Natasha, these past days have been the best I have had in a long time. Not despite you being here, but because of it. I like having you in my house. I like talking with you. I like who I am when I am with you. And if I am being completely honest, I started falling in love with you about 5 minutes after I found you in the darkness." Tears spilled down Natasha's cheeks. "Xavier, you cannot mean that. You feel responsible for me, protective, but that is not the same as love." "I know the difference," Xavier insisted. "I am 30 years old, Natasha. I have had enough experience to know what I feel. And I love you. I want to marry you, not just to protect you from Whitmore, though that is certainly a benefit, but because I cannot imagine my life now without you in it." "But what about what I want?" Natasha asked, her voice breaking. "I just escaped from one marriage. How can I possibly enter into another so quickly?" "Because this would be nothing like your marriage to Whitmore," Xavier said firmly. "I would never hurt you. I would never control you or cage you. You would be my partner, my equal in all things. And if you wanted to open that bookshop, I would support you completely. If you wanted to leave me someday, I would let you go, though it would break my heart." Sheriff Beckworth cleared his throat. "I will leave you two to discuss this. But think about it seriously, Miss Thorne. Whitmore is not going to stop, and this might be the cleanest solution to a messy problem." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat. "I will be back in 2 days. Whatever you decide, let me know then." After the sheriff left, Xavier and Natasha stood in awkward silence for a moment before Xavier helped her back into the house and onto the sofa. He knelt beside her, still holding her hands. "I am not asking you to decide right now," he said gently. "But I want you to know that my feelings are real. I love you, Natasha. Not because I feel sorry for you or because I want to save you, but because you are brave and smart and kind, because you make me laugh, because I admire your strength in surviving what you have survived. You are an extraordinary woman, and I would be honored if you would consider being my wife." Natasha looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity and hope. "Xavier, I care for you deeply. More than I thought possible in such a short time, but I am so afraid. Afraid of making another mistake, afraid of trusting my judgment, afraid of what loving someone again might cost me." "I understand," Xavier said softly. "And I am not asking you to stop being afraid. I am just asking you to be afraid with me together. We can face whatever comes, but we will face it together." "What if I am broken?" Natasha whispered. "What if Gerald damaged me so badly that I cannot be a proper wife to you?" "You are not broken," Xavier said fiercely. "You are wounded, yes, but wounds heal." And I would never push you to do anything you were not ready for. We could take this as slowly as you needed." Natasha closed her eyes, feeling tears stream down her face. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was too fast, too risky, that she barely knew this man. But her heart was singing a different song, telling her that Xavier Kerrigan was nothing like Gerald Whitmore, that this chance at happiness might never come again. "Can I have time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course," Xavier replied immediately. "Take all the time you need. I will not pressure you." Over the next 2 days, Natasha struggled with her decision. She spent hours sitting on Xavier's front porch, watching the desert landscape and thinking about her life. She had never expected to find herself in this position, having to choose between security with a good man and the uncertain freedom of being alone. She thought about what her life might look like if she said yes. She would be Xavier's wife, living on his ranch, helping him build his dream. She could open her bookshop in Old Tucson, coming home each evening to this house and this man. She could be safe, protected, and maybe even happy. But she also thought about what might happen if she said no. She would have to leave, find her way to San Francisco or somewhere else far from Gerald's reach. She would be alone again, building a life from nothing with no one to rely on but herself. It would be hard, maybe impossible, but she would be free in a way she had never been before. The second evening, as they sat together after dinner, Xavier broke the silence. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know something. If you choose to leave, to continue on to San Francisco or wherever you want to go, I will help you. I will give you money for the journey, write you letters of introduction to anyone I know who might help you, anything you need. You are not trapped here, Natasha. You have choices." His words were like a key unlocking something inside her. Gerald had always presented her with ultimatums, with threats of what would happen if she did not comply. But Xavier was offering her genuine freedom, the choice to stay or go with his full support either way. And in that moment, she realized that was the difference. Xavier loved her enough to let her go. Gerald had claimed to love her while holding her prisoner. "I do not want to go," she heard herself say. "I want to stay here with you, if you will have me." Xavier's face transformed with joy, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Are you sure? Truly sure?" "I am terrified," Natasha admitted, her face pressed against his chest where she could hear his heart beating strong and steady. "But I am also more certain of this than I have been of anything in a long time. I love you, Xavier. I think I have loved you since that first night when you carried me inside and promised to protect me. You have shown me what a good man really is, and I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." Xavier pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "You will never lose me. I promise you that." Then he kissed her, gentle and sweet, a kiss that promised everything and demanded nothing. Natasha felt something inside her that had been frozen solid begin to thaw, and she kissed him back with all the hope and love and gratitude that filled her heart. When Sheriff Beckworth returned 2 days later as promised, they told him their decision, and he smiled broadly. "I was hoping you would say that. I took the liberty of bringing Reverend Patterson with me, just in case." The Reverend, a cheerful middle-aged man with kind eyes, performed the ceremony in Xavier's front yard as the sun set over the desert. There were no fancy clothes or flowers, no guests or celebration. Just two people promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, with the sheriff and the Reverend as witnesses. When it was done and the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed Natasha again, and she felt truly safe for the first time in years. "Well," Sheriff Beckworth said with satisfaction, "that should put an end to Whitmore's claims. I will make sure he gets word of the marriage by tomorrow morning. My guess is he will leave Old Tucson in a rage, but at least he will leave. But the sheriff's prediction proved only partly correct. Gerald did not leave. Instead, he came to Xavier's ranch the next afternoon, arriving in a hired carriage with two of his remaining men riding alongside as guards. Xavier saw them coming and immediately positioned himself on his front porch, his rifle in hand. Natasha stood beside him, wearing the simple gold band Xavier had placed on her finger the day before. Gerald stepped down from the carriage, and Natasha felt her breath catch. She had forgotten how handsome he was, with his dark hair and aristocratic features. He was dressed impeccably as always, his suit expensive and his boots polished to a mirror shine. But as he drew closer, she could see the fury in his eyes, barely contained beneath a veneer of civility. "Natasha, my dear," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "This has all been such a terrible misunderstanding. Come, let us go back to town and discuss this reasonably." "There is nothing to discuss, Gerald," Natasha replied, pleased that her voice did not shake. "I am married now to Xavier. You have no claim on me, married." Gerald laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You were married to me, or have you forgotten? That ridiculous divorce in New Mexico means nothing. I have lawyers who will tear it apart." "The divorce was legal and final," Xavier interjected coldly. "And even if it was not, which it was, Natasha is my wife now. You need to accept that and move on." Gerald's pleasant mask slipped, revealing the rage beneath. "You," he snarled, pointing at Xavier. "You are nothing but a two-bit rancher who took advantage of a confused woman. I could buy and sell you 1,000 times over." "Money is not everything," Xavier replied calmly. "In fact, I have found it is usually nothing when it comes to the things that really matter." "How dare you?" Gerald hissed. He turned back to Natasha. "You are making a terrible mistake. This man cannot give you anything. I can give you everything: jewels, fine clothes, a mansion in Santa Fe. What can he offer you? A hovel in the desert and a life of drudgery." "He offers me something you never could," Natasha said quietly. "Respect, kindness, love. Those are worth more than all your money." Gerald's face turned an ugly shade of red. "You will regret this, Natasha. I swear to you, you will regret this. No one leaves me. No one makes a fool of Gerald Whitmore." "I think you are doing a fine job of that yourself," Xavier observed. "Now get off my property before I help you off." For a moment, it seemed like Gerald might do something violent. His hands clenched into fists, and his men moved their hands toward their weapons. But then Sheriff Beckworth rode up, clearly having been watching from a distance. "Problem here, gentlemen?" the sheriff asked mildly, though his hand rested on his own gun. Gerald visibly forced himself to calm down. "No problem, Sheriff. I was just leaving. But this is not over," he added, looking at Natasha with such venom that she unconsciously stepped closer to Xavier. "You have humiliated me, and I will not forget that." "Neither will I forget what you did to me," Natasha replied with more courage than she felt. "The difference is, I am choosing to move forward while you are still clinging to the past. I hope someday you can find peace, Gerald, but it will not be with me." Gerald turned on his heel and stalked back to his carriage. Within moments, he and his men were racing away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. "He will cause trouble," Sheriff Beckworth warned. "Men like that do not accept defeat gracefully." "Let him try," Xavier said, his arm around Natasha's shoulders. "We will face whatever comes together." But as the days turned into weeks and then months, Gerald did not return. Word came through the sheriff that he had left Old Tucson and returned to Santa Fe. Later, they heard that he had begun courting another young woman, someone from a wealthy family in St. Louis. "I should feel sorry for her," Natasha said, when Xavier told her the news. but mostly I just feel grateful that it is not me. Do you think he will marry her? Probably. Gerald needs someone to control, someone to make him feel powerful. I just hope she is stronger than I was, that she will see through him before it is too late. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Natasha's ankle healed completely, and she began taking on more of the household tasks, cooking and cleaning and making the small house feel like a real home. But Xavier encouraged her to pursue her dream as well, and she began making regular trips into Old Tucson, working at the general store 3 days a week and saving her wages. Xavier was everything a husband should be: patient, kind, and respectful. He never pressured Natasha physically, understanding that she needed time to heal from Gerald's abuse. Instead, they built their relationship on conversation and companionship, growing closer each day. It was nearly 3 months into their marriage when Natasha finally felt ready to be a wife to Xavier in every sense. They had been sitting on the porch one evening, watching the stars, when she took his hand and led him inside to the bedroom. "Are you sure?" Xavier asked, his voice husky but his eyes searching hers with concern. "We do not have to rush this." "I am sure," Natasha replied, reaching up to touch his face. "I want this. I want you. I am not afraid anymore." That night was a revelation for Natasha. Xavier's touch was gentle and reverent, so different from Gerald's selfish demands. He made her feel cherished and beautiful, and for the first time in her life, she understood what physical love was supposed to be: a gift shared between equals, not something taken by force. Afterward, lying in Xavier's arms, Natasha felt tears of joy slide down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Xavier asked, holding her close. "For showing me that love does not have to hurt, for being patient with me, for being you." Xavier kissed the top of her head. "You never have to thank me for loving you. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." As their first year of marriage approached, Natasha's bookshop became a reality. She had saved enough money from her work at the general store, and Xavier had contributed from his ranch profits. They found a small storefront in Old Tucson, right on the main street, and spent weeks cleaning and renovating it. Xavier built beautiful wooden shelves that lined the walls, and Natasha carefully selected her initial inventory from catalogs and from the few dealers willing to ship books out west. When they opened the doors for the first time, Natasha stood behind the counter and felt such a surge of pride and accomplishment that she thought her heart might burst. The shop was a success from the start. Old Tucson had been hungry for books, and Natasha had an instinct for what people wanted to read. She stocked everything from penny dreadfuls to serious literature, from practical manuals to volumes of poetry. She also began ordering books on request, becoming known throughout the territory as someone who could find any book if given enough time. Xavier would often come into town and sit in the shop while Natasha worked, reading in a comfortable chair by the window. Customers got used to seeing the tall rancher there, and many would stop to chat with him about cattle prices or weather patterns. The bookshop became a gathering place, a hub of community life. In the second year of their marriage, Natasha discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, her memories of Gerald and his violence making her question whether she would be a good mother. But Xavier's joy and excitement were infectious, and slowly, her fear transformed into anticipation. Their son was born on a cool October morning in 1880, delivered by Doc Morrison in their bedroom at the ranch. Xavier held Natasha's hand through the entire labor, never leaving her side, and when the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling with impressive lung power, Xavier wept with happiness. They named him Matthew, and he had his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Natasha had never known love like what she felt for her son, fierce and protective and overwhelming. Xavier was a wonderful father, patient and playful, and she often found him in the nursery they had prepared, just standing over the cradle and watching their son sleep. "What are you thinking?" she asked him one night, finding him there in the darkness. "I am thinking how lucky I am," Xavier replied, pulling her into his arms. "That night when I heard you jump from the train, I had no idea my whole life was about to change. If I had gone to bed early, if I had not heard you land, we might never have met." "Fate," Natasha murmured. "It must have been fate. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every day." As Matthew grew, the bookshop thrived and the ranch expanded. Xavier bought more land and increased his herds, hiring 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Natasha reduced her time at the bookshop to care for Matthew, but she still worked there 3 mornings a week, bringing the baby with her in a basket behind the counter. The people of Old Tucson embraced the small family, respecting their story and their determination to build a good life together. Occasionally, someone new to town would ask about Natasha's past, but the old-timers would shut down any gossip quickly. The Kerrigans were well-liked and respected, and the community protected them as their own. When Matthew was 2 years old, Natasha found herself pregnant again. This time, the fear was less and the joy more immediate. Their daughter arrived in the spring, a tiny thing with Xavier's smile and Natasha's determined spirit. They named her Emily Rose, and Matthew was enchanted with his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Life was not always easy. There were hard years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were droughts that tested Xavier's ranching skills and made every day a struggle. There were illnesses that frightened them and reminded them how fragile life could be. But through it all, they had each other. When times were hard, they pulled together, supporting and encouraging each other. When times were good, they celebrated together, grateful for their blessings. On their 10th anniversary, Xavier surprised Natasha by closing the bookshop for the day and taking her on a picnic to the spot where she had landed that fateful night. It had become something of a tradition for them to visit the place each year, remembering how their story had begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Xavier asked as they sat on a blanket, watching their children play nearby. Matthew was 12 now, tall and lean like his father, while Emily was 8 and fearless, climbing rocks and chasing lizards with equal enthusiasm. "Regret what?" Natasha asked, leaning her head on his shoulder, jumping from that train. "You could have stayed on, made it all the way to San Francisco, built a life there." Natasha was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I do not regret it for a second. San Francisco might have been exciting, but it would not have had you. And everything I have now, our children, our home, our life together, it is all because I jumped into that darkness and you were there to catch me." "I will always be there to catch you," Xavier promised, kissing her temple. Always. Years continued to pass. Matthew grew into a fine young man who wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and expand the ranch even further. Emily surprised no one by declaring that she wanted to take over the bookshop someday and turn it into the finest bookstore in the Arizona territory. When Natasha was 45 and Xavier was 51, they became grandparents for the first time. Matthew had married a sweet girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, and their first child was a boy they named Xavier after his grandfather. Xavier the elder was impossibly proud, carrying his namesake around the ranch and telling him stories about cattle and horses and the old days. Natasha expanded the bookshop again, adding a second room where she could host readings and lectures. She brought in speakers from all over, authors and professors and adventurers, and the bookshop became known throughout Arizona as a center of culture and learning. One evening, 20 years after they had married, Xavier and Natasha sat on their porch and watched the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. They were older now, with streaks of silver in their hair and lines on their faces that spoke of years spent squinting into the desert sun. But they still held hands, and they still found endless things to talk about. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Natasha asked. "When I told you I was afraid." "I told you that you were safe," Xavier replied, "and I promised to protect you." "You did more than that," Natasha said softly. "You gave me my life back. You showed me what love really means. You made me believe in happiness again." "We did that for each other," Xavier corrected gently. "You gave me purpose, Natasha. Before you jumped from that train, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me want to build something, to create a life worth living. Everything good in my life came from you." "Not everything," Natasha protested with a smile. "You built this ranch before I arrived." "The ranch is just land and buildings," Xavier replied. "You made it a home. You made it matter." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the desert evening. The call of a coyote in the distance, the rustle of wind through the scrub brush, the faint laughter of their grandchildren playing inside the house where Matthew and Sarah had brought them for dinner. "If you could go back," Xavier asked, "to that moment on the train when you made the decision to jump, knowing everything that would happen afterward, would you do it again?" "In a heartbeat," Natasha replied without hesitation. "Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear, it was all worth it to end up here with you. This life we built together, this family we created, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I love you, Natasha Kerrigan," Xavier said, bringing her hand to his lips. "I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left." "And I love you," Natasha replied, her eyes bright with happy tears. "My cowboy who came running into the darkness to help a stranger. You saved my life that night, and you have been saving it every day since." They watched the sun disappear below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. Behind them, through the windows of their house, they could hear their family. Matthew and Sarah, Emily and her new husband James, and their grandchildren, 3 so far with more surely to come. They could hear laughter and conversation, the sounds of love and life and connection. This was what Natasha had jumped into the darkness for, though she had not known it at the time. She had leaped from that train hoping only to escape, to survive another day. But fate and Xavier Kerrigan had given her so much more. They had given her a home, a family, a purpose, and a love that had endured through 2 decades and would endure until the end of their days. Years later, when Emily took over the bookshop as she had always dreamed, she added a new section that she called Love Stories of the West. The first book she stocked there was a slim, hand-bound volume that her mother had written during the quiet winter evenings. It was the story of a woman who jumped from a train into the darkness, and the cowboy who heard her land and ran to help. It was the story of fear transformed into courage, of strangers becoming partners, of wounds healing and trust rebuilding. But most of all, it was a love story, a testament to the fact that even in the hardest circumstances, even when hope seems lost, love can find a way. Because sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. Sometimes the most desperate leap of faith lands you exactly where you are meant to be. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, there is someone waiting in the darkness to catch you when you fall. Matthew eventually expanded the ranch to be one of the largest in southern Arizona, carrying on his father's legacy and passing it down to his own sons. Emily's bookshop became a beloved institution, surviving even as the frontier slowly gave way to civilization, and the wild days of the Old West faded into memory and legend. But the story of Xavier and Natasha lived on, told and retold by their descendants, a reminder that true love is built not in moments of ease but in times of hardship, not through grand gestures but through daily choices to honor, respect, and cherish each other. Their story became part of the history of Old Tucson, a tale that embodied the spirit of the territory: courage, resilience, and the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. When Xavier passed away at the age of 78, with Natasha holding his hand and their children and grandchildren gathered around, his last words were, "Thank you for jumping from that train. Thank you for trusting me to catch you." Natasha lived another 5 years after Xavier's death, spending her days in the bookshop she loved and her evenings with her family. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already lived a great love story and needed no other. When her time came, she died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by books and memories and the love that had defined her life. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a large cottonwood tree that Xavier had planted in their first year of marriage. Their gravestone was simple, bearing only their names, the years of their births and deaths, and a single line that Emily had chosen: "She leaped, he caught her, and love did the rest." The ranch prospered for generations, passed down through the family along with the story of how it all began. The bookshop remained a fixture in Old Tucson for over 100 years, eventually becoming a historical landmark. And though times changed and the world moved on, the legacy of Xavier and Natasha Kerrigan endured, a testament to courage, to kindness, to the transformative power of love, and to the beautiful truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the most desperate leaps of faith into the unknown darkness, trusting that someone good will be there to help you when you land.